My name is Claire, and at 29 years old, I never thought I would be a registered nurse sleeping in the break room of a hospital, hiding a garbage bag of clothes in my locker, and skipping meals so I could afford gas to get to my second job. The inheritance my father left me, including a rental duplex and a six-figure education trust, vanished into my stepmother's failing nail salon franchise while I worked double shifts until my hands shook. Then my 73-year-old grandmother walked into the emergency room one Tuesday night and found me passed out on the floor from exhaustion. What she did next turned my entire world upside down. Before I get into how everything changed, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours. I grew up in a 2-story brick house on a tree-lined street in Oak Park, just outside Chicago. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved from their porches and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. My father, Thomas, was a mechanic who had turned a one-bay garage into a thriving auto repair business with 12 employees and contracts with 3 local dealerships. He was a big man with rough hands and a gentle voice, the kind of person who would fix a stranger's flat tire in a rainstorm and refuse payment. My mother, Ruth, was a piano teacher who gave lessons in our living room every afternoon. I would come home from school to the sound of scales drifting through the house, followed by whatever song her students were stumbling through that week. She smelled like vanilla and lavender, and she had this habit of humming while she cooked dinner, always slightly off-key, which made my father smile every single time. Our kitchen table was where everything important happened: homework, holiday meals, family meetings, and long conversations that stretched past bedtime. Mom believed that sitting together at that table was what made us a family. Even on her busiest days, dinner was non-negotiable. My grandmother, my mother's mom, lived about 40 minutes south in Joliet. We called her Nana Grace, and she was the kind of woman who had an opinion about everything and the warmth to make you grateful for it. She had been a public school teacher for 35 years, and even in retirement, she corrected people's grammar and quizzed me on vocabulary words when I visited. She kept a garden that could feed the entire block, and every Sunday after church, she would bring over containers of food that lasted us half the week. She and my mother were incredibly close, talking on the phone every single day, sometimes twice. When I was 13, my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. It was stage 3 by the time they caught it. She had been ignoring the symptoms for months, chalking up the bloating and fatigue to stress and age. When the doctor finally gave us the diagnosis, I remember my father gripping the armrest of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. He did not cry in front of me, not once. But I could hear him at night through the bedroom wall, these low, broken sounds that did not even sound human. Mom fought for 14 months. Chemo, radiation, 2 surgeries, and a brief period of hope when the scans came back clear before the cancer returned with a vengeance. Nana Grace moved in with us during the last 4 months, sleeping on a cot in my parents' bedroom so she could help with night care. I learned to change IV bags and administer pain medication before I learned to drive. Watching my mother shrink from the vibrant woman who hummed off-key in the kitchen to a frail figure who could barely whisper goodbye was the thing that made me decide to become a nurse. I wanted to help people the way I wished someone could have helped her. Mom died on a Thursday morning in April. The cherry tree in our backyard was in full bloom, and I remember hating those blossoms for being so beautiful on the worst day of my life. Nana Grace held me at the funeral while my father stood like a statue, accepting condolences with a handshake and a nod, his eyes completely hollow. After the burial, Nana Grace pulled me aside and pressed a small velvet pouch into my hand. It held my mother's wedding ring. She wanted you to have this when you were old enough. I think now is close enough. She hugged me so tight I could feel her heartbeat against mine. Whatever happens, Claire, you come to me. You always come to me. Promise-moi. I promised. The year after Mom's death was quiet and heavy. Dad and I moved through the house like ghosts, careful not to disturb the silence that had settled where music used to be. He kept the piano tuned even though no one played it. I kept Mom's garden alive even though I had no talent for it. We ate dinner at the kitchen table every night, just the 2 of us, honoring her tradition even when neither of us had an appetite. Nana Grace visited every weekend, bringing food and forcing us to go for walks and sit in the sunshine. She was grieving too, but she carried it differently, channeling her pain into making sure Dad and I did not disappear into ours. Dad started seeing Karen about 18 months after Mom passed. She was the bookkeeper for one of his dealership clients, a sharp-featured woman with highlighted hair and a laugh that was a little too loud. She had a son from her first marriage, Tyler, who was 17 and wanted to be an entrepreneur, which at that point meant he sold overpriced phone cases online and called himself a CEO on his Instagram bio. When Dad first introduced me to Karen, she was charming. She asked about my nursing school applications, complimented the house, and told me how much she admired strong young women. She brought a casserole and a bottle of wine for Dad, and she listened attentively when he talked about the business. I wanted to like her. Dad deserved to be happy. Nana Grace was less enthusiastic. She met Karen once over Sunday lunch and was polite but reserved. Afterward, when we were alone washing dishes, she said something I did not fully understand until years later. That woman listens like she is taking inventory. I dismissed it as Nana Grace being protective. She had loved my mother fiercely, and no one was going to measure up, but Nana Grace did not push it. She simply said, "Just remember your promise, Claire," and changed the subject. Dad and Karen got married 8 months later in a courthouse ceremony. I was the witness. Tyler stood beside his mother looking bored. Karen moved into our house with Tyler, and the changes started slowly, so gradually that each one seemed reasonable on its own. Tyler needed the guest bedroom because it had better internet for his online business. Karen suggested rearranging the living room because the current layout was dated. My mother's piano was moved to the basement because it took up too much space. When Dad was home, Karen was attentive and sweet. She packed his lunches, organized his office, and told him constantly how smart and capable he was. But when he left for work, her mask slipped. Not dramatically at first. Just small comments delivered with a smile that did not match her eyes. "Your mother's curtains are a bit depressing, don't you think?" Or, "I noticed you still have her shampoo in the bathroom." "That is a little morbid, Claire." Tyler followed her lead, treating me with a casual dismissiveness that made me feel like a tenant in my own home. He would eat the leftovers I had saved for lunch, leave his dishes for me to clean, and play music at full volume when I was studying for my nursing exams. Nana Grace noticed the shift during her visits. Karen was always performatively warm when she came over, but Nana Grace watched everything with those sharp teacher's eyes. She started calling me more frequently during the week, asking specific questions. "Is Karen letting you use the kitchen? Does Tyler respect your space? Are you eating enough?" I downplayed everything, not wanting to worry her or cause problems for Dad. He seemed happier than he had been in years, and I was only a semester away from graduating. I could endure it. Then Dad started having chest pains. He brushed them off as stress, acid reflux, too much coffee. Karen agreed with every excuse, handing him antacids and telling him he worked too hard. I begged him to see a cardiologist. I was a nursing student, and I knew the warning signs. He finally made an appointment, but it was too late. 3 weeks before my college graduation, my father collapsed at the shop. Massive heart attack. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. The funeral was on a Saturday, overcast and cold for late May. Nana Grace sat beside me in the front pew, her hand gripping mine with surprising strength for a woman her age. Karen sat on the other side of the aisle with Tyler, both of them dressed expensively in black. Karen delivered a eulogy that painted herself as the devoted wife who had brought joy back into Thomas's life after tragedy. She did not mention my mother by name. She barely mentioned me. Uncle Ray, Dad's old business partner, approached me after the service. He squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Your dad talked about you every single day. Do not let anyone tell you different." Nana Grace overheard and nodded firmly, her eyes wet but fierce. A week later, we sat in the office of Dad's attorney, Mr. Whitfield, for the reading of the will. Dad had updated it after marrying Karen. The auto repair business was left to Karen with the stated intention that it would eventually transfer to me. The house went to Karen with the condition that I could live there until I turned 30. My education trust fund, which Dad had been building since I was born, and which contained roughly $180,000, remained designated for me, but Karen was named as trustee until I turned 30. There was also a rental duplex on Maple Avenue, a property Dad had bought years ago as an investment. It generated about $2,400 a month in rental income and was left to me outright, but the deed transfer was contingent on Karen's cooperation as executor of the estate. Karen nodded through the reading with an expression of solemn responsibility. As we left the office, she put her arm around me and said, "Do not worry about any of this, Claire. I will make sure everything your father wanted is taken care of." I believed her because I needed to. The real Karen emerged within a month. She called a house meeting one evening, Tyler beside her on the couch, both of them facing me in the armchair that had been my father's reading spot. "Claire, we need to restructure the living situation. Tyler is expanding his business and needs a proper workspace. We are converting your bedroom into his office. You can move to the basement where the piano is." The basement was unfinished, with exposed pipes and a concrete floor. My mother's piano sat down there collecting dust. When I protested, Karen's voice turned cold. "This is my house now, and I am trying to be generous by letting you stay at all. If you do not like the arrangement, you are welcome to find somewhere else." I moved to the basement that weekend. Tyler did not help carry my things down the narrow stairs. Karen watched from the kitchen, drinking coffee. Over the next few months, I slept on an air mattress next to my mother's piano in a basement that flooded every time it rained hard. My belongings from upstairs gradually disappeared or were damaged. When I asked about a box of my mother's photographs, Karen said she had accidentally donated it to Goodwill during a decluttering session. "I am sorry, Claire. I thought those were old magazines." There was no sorry in her voice. I graduated from nursing school and passed my boards, getting hired at Rush University Medical Center. I threw myself into the job, working every shift I could get, partly because I loved nursing and partly because the hospital was the only place I felt safe and valued. My plan was to save money, wait for the duplex deed transfer, and build an independent life. I limited my contact with Nana Grace during this period. She was 72 now, dealing with arthritis and the beginning stages of macular degeneration. I did not want to burden her with my problems. She had lost her daughter and her son-in-law within 3 years of each other. She did not need to know that her granddaughter was sleeping on an air mattress in a flooding basement. When she called, I kept things light. "Work is great. The house is fine. Karen and I are getting along." The lies came easier each time, and each one put a little more distance between us. The financial manipulation started about a year after Dad died. Karen sat me down with a spreadsheet and explained that the auto repair business was struggling. New competition, rising costs, supply chain issues. She needed to reallocate resources temporarily, which meant reducing the distributions from my trust fund. "Your tuition is already paid," she said, "so we just need to pause the living expense portion. It is only until the business stabilizes." When I asked to see the trust account statements, her expression hardened. "I am the trustee, Claire. Your father trusted my judgment, and frankly, your lack of gratitude is insulting." I was too exhausted from 12-hour nursing shifts to fight. I adjusted, picking up extra hours and cutting every personal expense to the bone. 6 months later, Karen informed me that the rental duplex on Maple Avenue needed significant repairs. The roof was leaking, the foundation had a crack, and tenants were threatening to leave. The repair estimates were enormous, and Karen suggested taking out a loan against the property. She needed my signature since the property was technically in my name, though the deed had still not been formally transferred. She presented documents late one night when I had just come off a 16-hour shift, my eyes burning with fatigue. I signed without reading every page. It was the worst mistake of my life. The truth started revealing itself in fragments. I ran into Mr. Okafor, one of the duplex tenants at the grocery store. He mentioned that the building had been sold 3 months ago and that he was now paying rent to a new management company. "What are you talking about?" I said, my stomach dropping. "It has not been sold." He looked confused. "We got the letter in January. New owner, new lease terms. Your stepmother handled everything." I drove to Maple Avenue that afternoon. The duplex looked exactly the same, but a new mailbox bore the name of an LLC I did not recognize. Back at the house, I searched Karen's home office while she and Tyler were out. In a locked desk drawer that I pried open with a flathead screwdriver, I found everything. Forged documents transferring ownership of the duplex to an LLC controlled by Karen. Bank statements showing systematic transfers from my trust fund to Tyler's business account, a nail salon franchise called Luxe Nails that had opened 3 locations in the suburbs. Credit card statements in my father's business name showing luxury purchases, designer clothes, spa treatments, a down payment on a BMW that Tyler now drove. The trust fund that should have held $180,000 had been drained to less than $11,000. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely photograph the documents with my phone. As I was replacing the papers, I heard the front door open. Karen and Tyler's voices drifted up from the entryway. I froze, listening. "We need to accelerate the timeline on Luxe Nails," Karen was saying. The Schaumburg location is hemorrhaging money. How much is left in the trust? Tyler asked casually, as if he were asking about the weather. Enough for maybe 2 more months of operating costs, Karen replied. After that, we will need to look at other options. She cannot challenge anything before she turns 30, and by then the money will be so deeply embedded in the business structure that no forensic accountant will untangle it. What if she figures it out before then? Karen laughed. Claire is too busy playing nurse to notice anything. And even if she did, what is she going to do? Hire a lawyer with money she does not have? I stood in that office with tears streaming down my face, listening to the woman my father had trusted plan the final theft of everything he had left me. Every instinct screamed at me to march downstairs and confront her. Instead, I took a breath, carefully locked the drawer, wiped my fingerprints off the screwdriver, and went to the basement. That night, lying on my air mattress next to my mother's silent piano, I made a plan. I would not confront Karen. Not yet. I would gather evidence, secure my independence, and wait for the right moment to strike. I would not give her any warning. The next morning, I told Karen I had been offered extra shifts at a second hospital and would need to move closer to the city for convenience. She barely looked up from her phone. Fine. Less groceries to buy. I packed everything I could fit into my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the car my father had maintained himself and given me for my 21st birthday, and drove away from the house where I grew up without looking back. I did not have a plan for where to sleep. My first night was in the parking garage of Rush University Medical Center, the hospital where I worked. I told myself it was temporary, just until I found an affordable apartment. But Chicago rents were brutal, and my savings were almost non-existent after months of reduced trust distributions. Temporary became a week, then 2, then a routine. I became a ghost who existed only inside the hospital. My shift started at 6 in the morning, and I would arrive at 5 to shower in the staff locker room, change into clean scrubs, and eat whatever was left in the break room from the previous night. After a 12-hour shift, I would pick up 4 hours at an urgent care clinic in Wicker Park, arriving home, if you could call it that, to my car around 11 at night. I had a system. Scrubs and work clothes hung from a hook on the passenger headrest. A small cooler in the footwell held yogurt, string cheese, and fruit. My nursing textbooks and laptop lived in a backpack that never left my side. I kept baby wipes, dry shampoo, and a toothbrush kit in the glove compartment for emergencies. The hospital parking garage was relatively safe, with security cameras and regular patrols. I parked on the 4th level near the stairwell, where the lighting was decent and foot traffic was minimal after midnight. On nights when the garage felt too exposed, I drove to a 24-hour Walmart on the west side and parked between 2 semis. I slept in the reclined driver's seat with a fleece blanket and a pillow I had taken from the hospital linen closet, setting my alarm for 4:30 every morning. The hardest part was not the physical discomfort, though my back developed a persistent ache from sleeping at an angle, and the Chicago autumn brought a cold that seeped into the car no matter how many blankets I layered. The hardest part was the loneliness. I talked to patients and colleagues all day, but I could not tell anyone the truth. My coworkers thought I was dedicated. My patients thought I was kind. Nobody knew that the nurse who checked their vitals and held their hands through pain had no bed of her own. I avoided Nana Grace's calls. She left voicemails every few days, her voice cheerful but increasingly worried. Claire Bear, I have not heard from you in a while. Just checking in. Call your grandmother. I would text back brief reassurances. Busy with work. Nana. Love you. Everything is fine. The lies were getting harder. Nana Grace was not someone you could fool easily. She had spent 35 years reading teenagers, and she could detect dishonesty the way some people detect perfume, instantly and from a distance. But her eyesight was getting worse, and the drive from Joliet to Chicago was difficult for her now. The physical distance made my deception possible in a way that proximity never would have. I had been living in my car for almost 3 months when my body finally gave out. It was a Tuesday night, and I was in the middle of a double shift. I had worked 14 hours straight, eaten nothing but a granola bar and 2 cups of coffee, and slept maybe 3 hours the night before because a car alarm kept going off in the parking garage. I was charting a patient's vitals when the room started tilting sideways. I grabbed the edge of the counter, but my fingers would not grip. The last thing I remember is the sound of a clipboard hitting the floor. I woke up on a gurney in the emergency room with an IV in my arm and Dr. Mehta, the attending physician, looking down at me with concern. Claire, when was the last time you ate a full meal? I mumbled something about lunch, but we both knew I was lying. Doctor. Mehta had my labs pulled up on his tablet. Your electrolytes are dangerously low. You are dehydrated and anemic. I am admitting you for observation overnight. As they were moving me to a room, I heard a commotion in the hallway. A voice I would recognize anywhere, sharp and clear and brooking no nonsense, cutting through the emergency room noise. I was told my granddaughter was brought in. Where is she? I need to see her right now. My name is Grace Holloway, and I am her emergency contact. Nana Grace appeared in the doorway of my room like a force of nature. She was smaller than I remembered, her hair whiter, a cane in her right hand that she had not needed the last time I saw her. But her eyes were the same, fierce and knowing and full of a love so intense it almost hurt to look at. She crossed the room in 3 steps, took my face in both her hands, and studied me with those teacher's eyes that missed nothing. You are thin, she said quietly. You have circles under your eyes that I could pack luggage in, and you have been lying to me. I opened my mouth to deny it, but something broke open inside me instead. Maybe it was the IV making me loopy, or the fluorescent lights making everything feel surreal, or just the simple, devastating relief of seeing the one person in the world who had ever told me to come to her no matter what. I started crying, and once I started, I could not stop. Nana Grace sat on the edge of my hospital bed and held me while I told her everything. Karen's takeover of the house, the basement, the forged duplex sale, the drained trust fund, Tyler's nail salons, living in my car, working until I collapsed. She listened without interrupting, her hand steady on my back, her breathing controlled. When I finally ran out of words, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice so calm it was terrifying, I am going to need you to show me those photographs you took of the documents. 2 hours later, Nana Grace had made 4 phone calls from my hospital room. The first was to her former student, Marcus Webb, who had gone from being a C- sophomore in her English class to becoming one of the most respected litigation attorneys in Cook County. The second was to her friend Dolores at the Joliet Savings and Loan, who had connections in real estate title research. The third was to Uncle Ray, my father's old business partner, who Nana Grace had stayed in touch with even after Dad died. The fourth was to her church prayer group because Nana Grace believed in covering all your bases. You are coming home with me tonight, she said, and it was not a question. When I started to protest, she held up one finger, the universal Nana Grace signal for silence. You made me a promise at your mother's funeral. You broke that promise, and we will discuss that later. Right now, you are going to eat the dinner I brought, sleep in a real bed, and tomorrow we are going to fix this. Your father did not work his whole life so that woman could steal your future while you collapse on hospital floors. I did not argue, partly because she was right, and partly because you did not argue with Nana Grace when she used that voice. I was discharged the next morning and drove to Joliet in Nana Grace's wake, her old Buick leading my battered Honda like a flagship leading a dinghy. Her house was exactly as I remembered, small, immaculate, and smelling like cinnamon and pine sol. The guest bedroom had fresh sheets, a quilt my mother had made, and a stack of towels so fluffy they felt like a luxury I did not deserve. I stood in the doorway and cried for the second time in 24 hours. Marcus Webb came to the house the next afternoon. He was a tall man in his 50s with reading glasses and a quiet intensity that reminded me of a coiled spring. Nana Grace made coffee and sandwiches while I walked Marcus through everything, showing him the photographs on my phone, the text messages from Karen about trust fund distributions, and the letter from the duplex tenants confirming the sale. Mrs. Holloway, Marcus said when I finished, turning to Nana Grace, you were right to call me. This is not just civil fraud. The forged property transfer alone is a felony. Combined with the trust fund misappropriation and the identity fraud involved in creating that LLC, we are looking at multiple criminal charges. How fast can you move, Marcus? Nana Grace asked. As fast as the judge will let me. I will file for an emergency petition to remove Karen as trustee and freeze all related accounts by end of week. I need a forensic accountant, and I know exactly who to call. Over the next 3 weeks, while I recovered at Nana Grace's house, Marcus Webb dismantled Karen's scheme with surgical precision. His forensic accountant, a woman named Janet Park, traced every dollar that had left my trust fund. The trail led directly to Lux Nails LLC, Tyler's failing nail salon franchise. Of the original $180,000, $142,000 had been diverted over 2 years. The duplex on Maple Avenue had been sold through a fraudulent LLC for $210,000, proceeds that Karen had funneled into a personal investment account and Tyler's business. Janet also discovered that Karen had been paying herself a monthly trustee fee of $1,500, a charge that was never authorized in the trust documents, and using the business credit line my father had built over decades to fund personal expenses. The confrontation happened in Marcus Webb's office downtown. Karen arrived with a young attorney who looked like he had passed the bar approximately 15 minutes ago. She was dressed impeccably, her composure intact until Marcus began laying out the evidence. He did it methodically, almost gently, the way a surgeon explains what he is about to remove. When he reached the photographs of the forged LLC documents, Karen's attorney leaned over and whispered something urgent. Karen waved him off. "Those were legitimate business decisions," she said. "Thomas would have wanted the business and the investments preserved. Thomas would have wanted his daughter to eat," Nana Grace said from her chair in the corner. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "Thomas would have wanted Claire to sleep in a bed, not in her car in a parking garage. Thomas would have wanted the trust he built for his only child to be there when she needed it, not paying for your son's nail salons." Karen turned to Nana Grace, and for the first time, real anger broke through her composure. "You have no idea what it takes to run a business. Thomas left me a failing company and expected me to make miracles. My father's business was profitable for 20 years before you touched it," I said. "Uncle Ray confirmed the books were solid when Dad died. You ran it into the ground and used my inheritance to cover your mistakes, and then you forged documents to steal my property." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You were always so dramatic, Claire, just like your mother, playing the victim, expecting everyone to feel sorry for you. If you had been more grateful for what I provided instead of running off to play nurse, none of this would have happened." Marcus cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mitchell, I would advise you to stop talking." He presented two options: a comprehensive settlement including immediate removal as trustee, full restitution of all misappropriated funds, return of the duplex or its equivalent value, and resignation from the family business, or civil and criminal proceedings that would become public record. Karen's attorney practically begged her to take the settlement. She resisted for 3 days before her own lawyer threatened to withdraw representation if she did not agree. The legal resolution took 2 more months, but the results were thorough. Karen was removed as trustee, with Nana Grace appointed as her replacement. The court ordered full restitution plus interest, totaling over $350,000 when the duplex value was included. Karen was forced to liquidate the nail salon franchise and her personal investment accounts to meet the judgment. The family business was placed under professional management by a team Uncle Ray helped select. The district attorney, presented with Marcus's evidence package, pursued criminal charges independently. Karen eventually accepted a plea deal that included 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent prohibition from serving as a trustee or fiduciary of any kind. Tyler was named as a co-conspirator in the civil case and was required to surrender the BMW and repay the funds directly traceable to his personal accounts. Throughout the process, Nana Grace was my anchor. She drove me to every meeting, sat in every waiting room, and made sure I ate 3 meals a day. She never once said "I told you so" about Karen, though we both knew she had seen it from the beginning. Instead, she focused on rebuilding. She helped me find a therapist, Dr. Simmons, who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. She cleared out her spare room and told me it was mine for as long as I needed it. She sat with me on her porch in the evenings while I relearned how to breathe without looking over my shoulder. In therapy, I unpacked years of damage I had not even recognized. Dr. Simmons helped me understand that Karen's manipulation had been systematic, designed to isolate me from support systems and erode my sense of worth so gradually I did not notice until I was sleeping in a car and calling it independence. The hypervigilance, the food hoarding I had started doing at Nana Grace's house, the panic attacks when I heard a car door slam at night, these were not weaknesses. They were survival responses that had served me when I needed them and now needed to be gently retired. Nana Grace and I built new rituals on the foundation of old ones. Sunday dinners became our anchor, just like the kitchen table tradition my mother had insisted on. Nana Grace taught me recipes that had been in the family for generations, standing beside me in her small kitchen, correcting my technique with the same firm patience she had used on 30 years of students. She told me stories about my mother's childhood, about my parents' courtship, about the day I was born and how my father had cried and laughed at the same time. These stories filled in gaps I did not know I had, giving me back pieces of a history that Karen had tried to erase. My nursing career recovered along with the rest of my life. I returned to Rush full-time, and the colleagues who had worried about my declining health saw a different Claire emerge. Dr. Mehta, who had treated me in the emergency room that night, became a professional mentor. He connected me with a hospital program that provided emergency housing assistance for staff members in crisis, a resource I had been too proud and too scared to seek when I needed it most. That discovery planted a seed. With my trust fund restored and the duplex reclaimed, I had financial stability for the first time in years. I moved into a small apartment in Lincoln Park, close enough to visit Nana Grace on weekends but independent in a way that felt earned rather than desperate. I kept my shifts at the urgent care clinic, not out of necessity anymore, but because I genuinely cared about the patients there. I also began volunteering with a nonprofit that provided support services for healthcare workers experiencing housing insecurity, a population that is far larger and more invisible than most people realize. The family business, under professional management, began recovering almost immediately once freed from Karen's mishandling. The managers Uncle Ray helped hire sent me quarterly reports, and I was slowly learning the operation my father had built. I was not ready to run it myself, but I was no longer willing to let someone else decide its fate without my input. Nana Grace and I reviewed the reports together over Sunday dinner, her teacher's mind sharp with questions about profit margins and employee retention. As for Karen and Tyler, they relocated to Indiana after the settlement. I heard from Uncle Ray that the nail salons had all closed and that Tyler was working at a car wash. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. I felt only the relief of distance, the freedom of no longer sharing a roof or a life with people who saw me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be loved. The duplex on Maple Avenue was returned to my name through a corrective deed transfer. Mr. Okafor, the tenant who had unknowingly tipped me off to the sale, still lived there. When I visited to introduce myself as the rightful owner, he shook my hand and said, "I knew something was not right about that sale. Your father was a good man and a fair landlord. I am glad his daughter is the same." I stood on the sidewalk outside that duplex and cried for maybe the 100th time that year, but these were different tears. Healing was not a straight line. I still woke up disoriented sometimes, reaching for the car door handle before remembering I was in a bed with sheets and a pillow. I still flinched when someone knocked on my door unexpectedly. I still kept a packed bag in my closet, just in case. Dr. Simmons told me that was normal, that the body holds on to trauma long after the mind has processed it, and that patience with myself was not optional but essential. Nana Grace, now 74, had slowed down physically but not mentally. Her eyesight was worse, and she used the cane more often, but her wit was razor sharp and her will was ironclad. She told me once, sitting on her porch watching fireflies, that finding me on that hospital floor was both the worst and best night of her life. Worst because I had to see what that woman did to you. Best because I got to be the one to help fix it. Your mother would have done the same thing. I just got there in her place. That sentence broke me open in a way I did not expect, because I realized that the chain of love in my family had never actually been broken. My mother loved me, and she taught her mother to love me the same way. My father loved me, and he built a future meant to protect me even after he was gone. Karen had tried to sever those connections, to isolate me so completely that I would have no one to turn to. But she underestimated a 73-year-old retired teacher with a cane, a phone book, and absolutely zero tolerance for injustice. Today, 2 years after Nana Grace found me on that hospital floor, my life looks nothing like it did during those months in the parking garage. I coordinate a program at Rush that identifies and supports hospital employees experiencing housing crises. I own the duplex free and clear, and the rental income supplements my salary in a way that gives me breathing room I once thought impossible. I sit on the board of my father's company. I have dinner with Nana Grace every Sunday without fail. And I keep my mother's wedding ring on a chain around my neck, where I can feel it against my heart every time I take a breath. If you are in your own impossible situation right now, sleeping somewhere you should not have to sleep, eating less than you should have to eat, pretending everything is fine when nothing is fine, I need you to hear this. You are not weak for struggling. You are not a burden for needing help. And the person who might change everything for you could be one honest phone call away. I wasted months avoiding my grandmother because I thought protecting her from the truth was an act of love. It was not. It was pride and shame dressed up as selflessness, and it almost cost me everything. Have you ever had someone show up for you exactly when you needed them most? Or have you been that person for someone else? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might be the thing someone else needs to hear today. Do not forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that even when you think you are completely alone, family has a way of finding you. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, your story is still being written, and the next chapter might be the one that changes everything.